Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Police Accountability Board meeting of Thursday, March 21st, 2026. As you can see, we have a pretty full agenda today, but before we get started, I'm going to go around the room and have all of the various commissioners introduce themselves, starting on my left.
Brown, and I represent the Alliance. I want to thank you all for taking the time to come join us and to help participate and move unity means everything.
I'm the Reverend Keith Patterson, and I am a PAB Alliance member.
Good evening, Karen Thomas, PAB Alliance member.
Hello, Luam Taklab, Vice Chair and East District seat.
AJ Derwin, Northwest Council seat.
And I'm Bill Clark. I'm the mayor's appointee to the board. Thank you. Before we get started, I do want to thank our American Sign Language interpreters today, Wayne and Anna. Thank you for being here today. And I want to say good evening to everyone who's watching on YouTube. Thank you for joining us also. As I indicated earlier, we will be have a pretty full agenda, so we're going to try to get through this in a reasonable amount of time. So I'm going to start by indicating that hopefully everyone had a chance to review the minutes from our last regular meeting, April 2nd meeting. And if that's the case, I would ask for a motion to approve those minutes. It's properly moved in second. Don't see any discussion. All in favor? Great. The minutes have been approved. We're going to go ahead and move into our reports at this point in time. And the first report is Transforming Data into Transparency, the PAB Public Dashboard Demonstration.
Hello, everybody. So this dashboard was created recently due to policy team member Sophia. She suggested us to bring up something to be more interactive to the website, which helped the information to be more digestible for the user. I understand we always have a monthly report coming out, but with this dashboard, it would have more context, adding more context to this report. So since this report has been uploaded to the website, I'm just going to walk it through you guys. So data and report is where we usually keep all the reports. And as you can see in the monthly report, I started at another accountability dashboard right here, where you can see the chart of all the cases has been submitted, either online, walk-in, phone call, during the April of 2026.
Make it a little bigger. Can it get bigger?
This? So a lot of this is a combination of all the cases where a common allegation types, the incident zip code where it happens, the races, submission method, submission method, and ages, gender. All of this is pretty relative to the cases, which helps, again, more digestible for the user. Instead of reading through the whole monthly report, they can always just go back to this dashboard instead. For now, this is all we got. But like Leslie have said, we try to improve it as the time goes by, and I will go back to the past cases in previous month and start to add those dashboards. So this is an ongoing project, basically. On top of that, right now those dashboards you just saw is static, but if the user decides to go to the dashboard under the report, they can see these are the cases from user force from fiscal year 2024-2025, which is a year ago, where these are more interactive and live on the site. Like I said again, this is a dedicated pages for this dashboard where we will create more in the future when the policy team do more research and coming up with more numbers for data for us. Any question? Oh,
I have a
never
question.
mind.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the presentation. Thank you for lifting up that Sophia was a part of this project. And I know a while ago, Sophia did lift up another city's police accountability board's website that had something similar to this.
Yep.
Was that was there a relationship being built between that city to figure out how we can dive deeper into this?
Yeah, definitely. So I think they got the idea after the NACO from last year that it came back from. We did create a relationship with them by having a lot of email back and forth. Even though the data point is a bit different from ours, so it did take some time for us to translate the metadata that we got from our compared to them. So that does take some time to do it, especially the team does need more resources.
That's great. I love to hear about that collaboration. And I think this is a great visualization of the fact that we're still receiving complaints and provides that data to the community and shows how our policy and oversight team is working on doing that investigation in terms of seeing overarching patterns and practices and policies and procedures. Thank you so much.
Nice. And yes, AJ?
Yes, thank you. Very interesting. I'm curious about what functionality this dashboard will have in terms of being able to analyze and compare data. So, for example, I see there's a graph above where it looks like it's comparing month over month data. Yep. Is there going to be ways to, say, track it over years or see the number of, say, you have your use of force, number of use of force cases, over time, or comparing one year to another, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so like I said, those dashboards will need more feature to be added to. For example, this is what I got so far. This is the one I have for you over earlier is live, but this is the idea of where you can filter out the zip code of the races happen on certain zip code or happen to certain gender when it comes to different zip code. And this feature will be implemented to the live. It just, again, it takes time for me to figure out how to add it. So yes, like you said, we will add more feature, more data as we go by and time go by.
And another question related to that. So the data regarding zip code, is that the most granular level of data we have regarding geographic region, or do we have more specific data than that regarding, like, the address, for example, of a particular instance? And if so, is there a way to represent that on, say, a map? So
yes.
People could look at, here's my street. What happened on my street?
Funny enough, Sarah actually has that idea where we use a map to represent certain cases where a search box can appear and people can type in their address. But that would definitely require more technical research on my end to do those. Even though it is doable, because I know the city of Rochester already have a base where we can just use it as a template and build up from that.
Thank you.
Now, in the past, I thought there was a confidentiality clause that did not allow us to put addresses in.
Anything else? Thank you, guys.
Is what's called a proposal for change. And a proposal for change comes right from our charter around making recommendations relative to a particular situation as it involves RPD. Sarah Jenks, who is an oversight manager in the policy and oversight team, produced the Policing and Community Surveillance, Your Right to Privacy, and you all received this, I think, a week and a half or 2 weeks ago. And so she is here just to give a brief overview again of that, just to refresh your memory. And then certainly if you have any questions, please feel free to ask the questions. And then it's our hope that you will vote affirmatively on this so we can move forward. What's important to know is once it is hopefully approved, then this information, we've created the documents already, it goes to the chief of police, the mayor, and city council, and they have 30 days to respond. And again, this is per our chart.
Thank you so much. It's so nice to see everyone tonight. Last time I saw you was January regarding this same topic. So as Dr. Myers-Small just mentioned, we are at the tail end of the proposal for change process. So in January, I presented to you on the draft of this project. And then once we launched that to the public, we went through a about 30-day public input period where we went around to the community and discussed this project in the media so that we could get feedback from the people of Rochester on what it included, what it missed, and what people had ideas about. So you all received a document called the Summary of Public Input, where I described just that. And I broke down to about 5 themes that emerged from that process. And from those themes, I edited the draft that you originally saw. So what you have today, or what you received over email, was the final, given all of that public input. And so later today, you would vote on whether or not we issue those recommendations in that final to City Council, the mayor, and the chief of police, as Dr. Myers-Small described. And that starts the clock on the chief's response. For each of those bullet points, at the beginning and the very end of the document, so like the recommendations are the same in both places, but that's what you'll be voting on. The chief would then respond to each of those and say, yes, we will implement, no, we won't. If yes, the chief would give a timeline, and if no, he would give it a reason as to why they wouldn't implement it. And some of these things we know are already happening. So anyways, let me just, would you like me to describe the changes from the draft? Yes? Okay. All right, one moment. All right, so the first theme was about the transparency. Oh, thank you, Lou. Oh, that's great. Oh, perfect. Okay, so some participants were surprised to learn about the connectivity between like home security cameras and law enforcement agencies. And then actually a lot of people learned about that from the 2026 Super Bowl. There was a controversy with Flock. Anyway, so people feel like they're just not aware of the technology that the police department is using, in what ways and how invasive it kind of feels. So for this reason, I revised the draft to incorporate recommendations that are, this came from former City Council member Kim Smith, that we make mandatory a public hearing for any legislation or like request for funding that comes before City Council to appropriate funds for surveillance technology so that the public can know before it starts what it entails. Secondly, that the RPD should carry out a targeted community engagement campaign in the affected neighborhoods when they're implementing new surveillance technology. This particular recommendation was in response to the fact that the RPD did not alert those who live in the Clinton section that their neighborhood would be the test ground for the drones as first responders program. Second was that just a lot of people said how dramatically this feels like an invasion of personal privacy and it affects their civil rights. So I just revised the draft to incorporate some of those responses that came from the public, just to show, like, on a personal level what this means to people. Next, the effectiveness of surveillance technology. This came out of my presentation to you back in January. And the scientific or the academic research is kind of a wash. It's like neither cost effective nor cost ineffective to implement surveillance technology. What really puts surveillance over the edge as being effective is when it's constantly monitored so that there could be real-time response. However, that is an extra level of invasion that needs to be weighed. And then we had a good example from the responses in the survey. A person talked about how, as a grand juror, they saw the direct value of blue light cameras in properly identifying suspects in everything from assaults to murders to traffic infractions. So showing that this actually has utility for the purpose that it's supposed to. The fourth theme was that surveillance technology can be used as accountability tools. So that's the idea that body-worn camera footage, for example, can be used to show what happened at a scene when there's a discrepancy in the paperwork, for example. And for that, I talked about revising the draft to talk more about the RPD's own dashboard that shows frequency of activation for body-worn camera. So there are goals for people who have fewer than 20 traffic stops and people who have more than 20 traffic stops, or officers, I'm sorry. They have different expectations about how often they activate their body-worn camera. And you can see this updated every quarter on the RPD's open data portal to see, like, on a grand scale, out of everyone who does traffic stops, how often are they activating their camera? And that's a great tool. And then lastly, I did a stand-in alone analysis of the public input that we received from the RPD via Captain Bellow's media release. It was really helpful to have them participate in this public input that way. And a few points that they made were that, like, United Christian Leadership Ministry, he felt that we did not give enough attention to them, and I regret that I did not write it in the report originally, but as you can all attest to, I did mention it when we were here, and I think it is really important to give credit where it's due. So I revised the draft to include more information about that. They also said that we should be disaggregating crime by property versus violent crime, and I totally agree. I did not do so because it wasn't clear that the RPD had done so. So with that advice, you'll see that the analysis had been changed in a new way. And what I found is that neither type of crime on the census tract, on the level of census tract, neither type of crime was associated strongly with the placement of the cameras. Both have what we would call a low correlation in statistics. And as they said, they place cameras where there's higher rates of violent crime. And while those two didn't differ greatly, it was true that violent crime was just slightly more correlated with the placement of the cameras. So I'm really glad that they suggested that, and then I got to include it. And then lastly, they criticized the inclusion of the Kingfish device, the cellular transceiver, in the report because it hasn't been used in over 10 years. But I think it's really important for the people of Rochester to know that not only did this program exist, but it was governed by a clandestine agreement between City of Rochester, or the RPD, the Harris Corporation, and the FBI. And 10 years isn't really that long ago, and it's important for us to maintain the mindset that there might be other pieces of surveillance technology that we aren't aware of right now. So let's see. So in response to that, I tried to include a clearer justification as to why I included the cellular transceivers, given its potential harm to civil liberties and the covert nature of the program. So that's the description of how I changed things. I'd be happy to take your questions.
You indicated that the police department hadn't used it in 10 years, but is that because they got something better now that we don't know about? And how do we cover things that we're not aware of as it relates to kind of monitoring?
This is all a great question, and I don't have answers to that because also I keep remembering that even the answer that we don't use this device anymore adheres to the non-disclosure agreement. So, of course, that is the line that I've heard over and over, and all I can do is say that RPD states that they have not used this device in 10 years. And we don't know what we don't know because some of these things may be also governed by non-disclosure agreements. So I don't even know how to answer.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment, more of a comment than a question. Sarah, I really appreciate your work on this, including the updates. I think it was very well done, so thank you for all the time. Regarding the question about what we don't know, we know under the charter, our agency is supposed to have access to all data and evidence, all databases, all records from RPD. This would include access to non-disclosure agreements. In the same way that RPD as an agency of the city has access to those documents, we as an agency of the city should be able to have access to those documents. I get that's sometimes easier said than done, but I just want to point it out for the record that under the charter, we should have a right to know what the police are doing and have records. Any records that they have access to, we should have access to.
Thank you. Okay, thank you again.
No other questions? Thank you.
Oh, yeah, and as always, you can reach me by email if you would want to talk about anything else.
I so moved on the proposal for change.
Nice second.
As Dr. Heather Feynman is coming to the front, Dr. Feynman is going to present to the board on language access. And again, this is something that is in the charter and is a requirement. Heather previously presented this information to the staff, and now she is presenting to the board. Very helpful and useful information that I think you'll find informative. Thank you.
Good evening. This is part of your board training, language access. I condensed it because there's a lot of information that I'll show you, but you don't need to know the details on how to make the phone calls. You don't have to. So, welcome. Hello. Why do we do this? We want to make sure that interpretation is verbal work and translation is written work. And why do we do this? It's the law. ADA requires government entities, which we are, to make sure that we have access for the deaf and hard of hearing. Currently, the law for New York State and the law for the city of Rochester is unclear on anything else. As A.J. Darwin and I were at the Attorney General's office summit last year, they realized there was a huge problem with language access in the city of Rochester. The Attorney General has been working with the Language Access, Monroe County Language Access Coalition, MECLAC, ever since then, working on language access, and a new policy is being put out. They said June 1st, but they may wait till the Attorney General comes back in June 10th. He's having a return summit forget what they're calling it, but she's going to do an update on language access as part of that update that's going to happen. So this changes again very soon. So verbal communication is very important, but it is not just about words. It's about language, culture, and body language. One of the things that people don't understand is they often see me with my hands crossed, and that's because I'm actively signing in my head. ASL has become my native language, and so I'm not standing here talking with you and signing. I often cross my arms to stop myself from signing. So, but there are other things. Often, crossing your hands is seen as a sign of they're not listening. So I have to explain that sometimes. Nodding your head is an agreement of one of the things that you're listening, that you're paying attention. So body language is important, and it differs from culture to culture. The first thing that you need to do when you have a language that comes in front of you and you're not exactly sure what's going on is to find out how to figure out what the language is. At the office, we have required by law forms. We have them in every entrance, big, so you can point to what language it is that you speak, and then they can utilize language through the technologies that have been set up. We have these also that are put on our website. If you want to come to a meeting, you can then call and make sure that you have it. But if someone comes in, the visual aids work. The staff, we have quite a few staff that speak other languages. We have multiple Spanish speakers in our office. We have Vietnamese. We have Korean. And that might be it at this time. Language line, if you call yourself, you say, I think this person is speaking, I'll say Chinese. And you get on the phone and they say, oh, no, that's Korean. And they say, oh, but we'll get you a Korean person, don't worry. So you can call language line and ask yourselves. Okay? Give them an idea of what you think language is. And one of the things that I've learned is Somali has another dialect called Mai that I walked into somewhere and said, oh, I need someone who speaks Somali, and I got Mom on the phone, and Mom didn't speak Somali, spoke Mai, so we had to go through find multiple interpreters. There are 76 dialects of Arabic alone. So you need to make sure you're finding the proper dialect. But when you have culture, eye contact sometimes is considered rude in some cultures. So there are some cultures where you were never going to see someone in the eye, and that's because it's out of respect for you. Some neurodivergent people are not comfortable with eye contact. When I did this, obviously the presentation was done for the staff, so when they have an interview, they need to make sure that there's proper sexing of a team. There are many cultures where having opposite sex in the same room without a chaperone, if you will, is considered very, very uncouth. When you're speaking to someone who speaks a different language, you don't say to them, you don't say, ask them, because the interpreter will say, ask them. And then everything gets confused. Who is them? Okay, tell them. Everyone, they keep saying, the person will be like, who is them? That creates lots of. The last thing is having patience, because not only are you working with somebody with another language, there are some cultures that when you meet them, they have to tell you a story. There's a Native American story where when you meet somebody, you have to tell them the story of where they came from, not just their name. There's a story to their name. In deaf culture, you introduce yourself. So I will frequently stop as an interpreter, say, hi, my name is, and introduce myself, and say, your turn. You get to introduce yourself, because it's the height of rudeness not to. But even if it's an emergency, they need to tell their story. Body language and gestures, there are many people who sign that I think I'm in a restaurant and I'm like, what are they signing? Oh, no, that's not themselves. But gestures are all over the world. We had talked about nodding of the head and eye contact. Personal space is another thing. There are some cultures that need to have bubble, and others that don't require that at all. So you need to make sure. Greetings are very, very important. In our office, we have language line phone ability. Every single person in the office, especially the case managers, they have little cards. You all have a number that you can call, identify your, and you make sure you go through the call. So we have the phone. And we also have inbound calls that can come through and say, hi, I speak whatever language, and you can connect to language line and have the. We are the, as far as I can tell, the only agency in the city that has video. The police do not have video, but that means they cannot have a sign language. So we, as an agency, have 8 different iPads, computers that can be used and utilized for sign language. One is a phone for one of the specialists, so that there can have a conversation fluent. Now, not only is that able to be used sign language, if you have somebody who just seems to really be struggling, gestures are part of language. So you can pull up a language, any language. Today, on the video, and then there can have VRI is when a deaf person will call using an interpreter in the middle. So you'll get a call, you'll say, hi, my name is John, and you're like, because it's an interpreter in the middle, making sure that there is a conversation. That's an FCC regulated, mandated thing, and part of the ADA requirements. So they need to know that that exists. There are some important tips when you're working with someone in a different language. Most people cannot read lips, and if you can is text. You need to speak clearly and slowly. Things like making sure you know that your iPad is charged when you go out, asking for accommodations. You can say, would you prefer an interpreter? Would you prefer a male interpreter? Would you prefer captions? I mean, there's a lot of ways to be able to make sure that accommodations are met. One of the things that I wanted to make sure that our staff knows is when somebody comes in, they're not coming in because everything's sunshine and roses. So it's a very serious conversation that you will be having, and it might be difficult. So you want to make sure that there's clear understanding and that there's patience. Also, if they do not seem to be understanding, because you asked for a Somali interpreter, and Somali is not really the dialect they speak, you can ask questions like clarifying questions to make sure they understand, and if not, ask for another interpreter. And ask the person if they need another interpreter, because they'll tell you. They'll tell you, okay? And remember where they come from. One of the things that I learned when we were doing the surveys that multiple languages, a lot of the people were fairly satisfied with some of the police conduct. And when I spoke to one of the interpreter agencies that helped us, they said, you have to remember where they come from. The police in their countries were much more intense situations. I'll leave it at that. So they see our police and think differently. Written communication is interpreted into Spanish currently, and all translations. I've tried to condense that as quick as possible for you, and if you have any questions. One of the things that's important is don't be afraid to make mistakes. I've been signing for 40 years, and I still make mistakes every single day. But the willingness to try, the willingness to learn, be friendly face sometimes is enough to.
Great, thank you. Okay, great.
No.
Just wanted to say thank you very much for the presentation. This is absolutely essential to the work we do to ensure that the PAB is accessible to the entire community. One thing I didn't hear you mention, but I think it's sort of a best practice, and I think it would be important for people to know, is while you went through some things that definitely should be done when we're thinking about interpreting languages, One thing that can be tempting, but generally should not be done, is relying on family members or children of the person coming to speak. Often, they might rely on their children, say, to interpret for them or to translate for them in their day-to-day life. But particularly when we're talking about potentially traumatic experiences like this, especially important to use these services that we have access.
So medically, it's the law. For government, it's not clear. And that's one of the things that, as you are well aware at the Attorney General Summit, was brought up repeatedly. And I have a feeling that June's policy will talk a lot about that. But especially in cases like this, and one of the reasons I didn't mention it, because it seems to be a lot of very tense situations. Domestic violence is one of the worst, where you have a person who is being a victim of domestic violence who speaks another language, and the person who's translating for her is her abuser. So how do you know what she's saying? How do you know if she's real or if he's just saying whatever he can and he's going to abuse her when they walk out the door? And that happens all of the time. And then having children interpreting for domestic violence is even worse, in my opinion. And domestic violence comes in many different fashions, and having intimate details about sexual assault and your child is translating for you is one of the worst things I could possibly imagine. But unfortunately, the law does not state for language, for LEP, or there's many different synonyms now, but for language, low English proficiency people, LEP people, the law is not clear now, which is why the Attorney General's.
Can everyone hear me okay? Okay. Good evening again to the board, to the staff who are here, to our community members. I see Pastor Wanda is here from the PABA, and those who are listening. Thank you for being here tonight. Before I begin this formal presentation, I think it's important to acknowledge something directly. The last several months at the Police Accountability Board have been extraordinarily difficult for the agency, for the board, for staff, and for many members of the community who believe deeply in the original vision of the Police Accountability Board. April 28th, 2025, March 20th, 2026, those decisions fundamentally changed the operational landscape of our agency. And so there is no way to responsibly discuss the future of the PAB without first acknowledging that stark reality. At the same time, however, tonight is certainly not about defeat. Tonight is about clarity. Tonight is about whether our agency chooses to remain frozen in what we lost, which was very significant, or whether we strategically and intentionally define what accountability still can look like moving forward. And I think it's certainly important that we not take away from the fact that we are appealing and that there are other legislative strategies that we are working on very actively in order to gain our investigatory authority back. So I want to be clear, the work still does matter. Our mission still matters, and public accountability absolutely matters. What has changed is not the need for oversight in Rochester. What has changed is the operational framework in which we now must function. This moment requires strategy, and it requires for us to move from reaction to be very intentional about the work that we're doing. So tonight, I plan to talk about and walk through what transformation looks like at the Police Accountability. This transition is not rooted in abandoning our mission and vision. This is a legal and operational reality that we are experiencing. So the question before us now is, what does accountability look like now? How do we hold the Rochester Police Department, the sworn officers of the Rochester Police Department, accountable? Because the answer can't be, we do nothing. This community still expects accountability, City Council expects accountability, and you as a board expect responsibility, and you have a responsibility to serve the public in meaningful ways. So what does the next chapter of the Police Accountability Board look like? It looks like a reframed role built around 4 key functions. And I just want to add that this presentation has gone through a few iterations, and this presentation was not created in a vacuum. I worked with the chair and the vice chair of the Police Accountability Board. I met with the leadership team, and I met with our staff, and we conducted a couple hours of conversation around this. So this isn't something that I just created. I want to be clear about that. So let's talk about the reframed role: complaint intake and pattern identification. So we will continue receiving complaints. And even though one of our board members, Larry Knox, is not here, every time I say that we are still accepting complaints, and it's still important for us, for the community, to know that we are receiving complaints. But now, instead of viewing complaints in an isolated only relative to alleged misconduct, we're analyzing them for trends, for patterns, repeat concerns, and systemic indicators. Because patterns tell us where systems may be failing. And board member A.J. Derwin actually brought that conversation up with Lou when he went through the iteration of those 14 complaints. So that's new. We are dissecting. I love the fact, AJ, that you picked up on the trend analysis. So as we do that look back and go back to July 1, we'll look at differences between the months, between the quarters, and then we'll look overall. And I'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. Second is policy oversight and systems reform. And this is really a powerful area. So again, this work changes our focus from individual incidents to larger systemic issues. So where are there policy gaps, operational practices, transparency concerns? And we've talked a lot about the transparency concerns. Technology oversight, you heard that from Sarah Jenks tonight. Trends in public complaints and institutional accountability. This is oversight work, it's just a different form of oversight. Thirdly, transparency and public education resource. One of the biggest gaps in public accountability is understanding. People cannot engage with systems that they do not understand. So part of our responsibility moving forward is helping the public to understand policies, technologies, complaint processes, patterns, oversight limitations, and why these issues even matter. Fourth, we are shifting community engagement from simply listening to listening, analyzing, acting, and reporting back. And I might add that that distinction matters. The community deserves more than listening sessions, and this is no way a knock against the PACE division because they have done extraordinary work. Alone, between July 1 and April 30th, they have engaged with 4,508 community members. That's powerful. So the shift. This slide represents the organizational the shifts that are taking place. So investigations to pattern identification. Rather than being able to solely focus on individual investigations, we are identifying recurring concerns and system-level trends. From cases to trends. One case can be important, but patterns across multiple complaints can reveal deeper institutional concerns. So, for example, we know that just by looking at cases over the past several months, and this is particularly apropos given where we're located now at 57 St. Paul Street, what are we right opposite? RTS. RTS is a hot spot for law enforcement activity. And so we are digging deeply into that this summer, and we're going to look at that. Our goal is to actually set up shop in the RTS, have conversations with people as they're going back and forth, and then we can report back to the community, we can report back to RTS, and even hopefully make some recommendations. Individual focus to systems accountability. So the work becomes a little bit broader, data informed, policy formed, and really the goal is to be preventative. We don't want to interact or make a recommendation. In some cases, yes, we have to do that, but hopefully we can be more preventative, prevent things from happening in our community. And then internal work to public-facing outputs. And this is critically important. The public needs to see the work, right? Not just hear about it internally. So that means dashboards, and I'm really, really excited about this board, that the dashboards will become much more dynamic. And again, AJ, thank you for asking that. We want people to click and to be able to see different intersections of the way the data is disaggregated. Now, some people like to do that. I love to do that, but we want to make it easy for those who don't enjoy that or don't have the time to do that. It means reports. It means explainers, and we're going to actually hand out explainer to you in a little while. It means data transparency, recommendations, and public engagement. So, a lot of people are saying, well, why does this even matter anymore, right? Because complaints still matter. Community voices still matter. People need to have a place to be able to submit what they believe is an injustice. And while we can't individually investigate it, we can, again, look for patterns. And hopefully, if we once we go through the appeal process and we're back there, we'll have these complaints to look back on. But it's important to give voice to people. I have sat through when complaints come through, and people are so passionate, and they are hurting. And what we hear, and this is something that I have not shared and that RPD is not aware, most people in our community are afraid to submit a complaint to the Rochester Police Department. I mean, you could put any city in front of that. Syracuse Police Department, right? Denver Police Department. People are afraid of a retaliation. They're afraid that they might not be safe anymore. And that's a reality. This is not me beating up on RPD. This is a reality that people really feel is factual. And accountability certainly still matters. And accountability is bigger than just a single investigatory model. And again, I'm not saying that's not important, because accountability also means transparency, public reporting, systems reform, data analysis, policy evaluation, and community trust. So there are 4 strategic priorities that we'll focus on, in order to operationalize the shift. We certainly, number 1, need to strengthen the organization, clarifying structures, roles, deliverables, and our ability to be sustainable. Secondly, to transform and operationalize oversight, turning oversight into measurable public-facing work. People want to see that, and they need to have that information. Thirdly, advance data-driven policy and systemic reform using data, trends, policy analysis, and research to identify systemic concerns. And I just want to pause here for just a moment because the report and the update and the analysis that you received from Ms. Jenks is a high quality analysis that takes knowledge about research. It takes knowledge about disaggregating data and then being able to analyze it in a way that is to present it in a way that's easily digestible by the community. And so that's not easy work. And it certainly requires skill and time and expertise and talent. And then the fourth strategic priority is to reimagine community engagement and public trust. So moving from symbolic engagement to strategic engagement with outcomes. And for those of us who had the opportunity to participate in the NACOL conference this past year, this was something that was was reiterated and was a focus that we have to have authentic community engagement. So what does success look like? Success must sound measurable, and you're going to hear that over and over again. We can't say what we think or it would be better if we did this. We really need to be able to qualify and quantify it. Success moving forward is not ambiguity, it's measurable. So clearer work streams, staff and public understand what we do, because that's a question, even though we've been out there, we've had those 4,500 engagements, people still don't understand, and particularly with our legal challenges and the battles that we've had. We want to have consistent output, so regular reports that are coming out, dashboards, explainers, and recommendations that the public can wrap their hands around. Public visibility. The community should consistently see evidence of our work and our value added. Community trust and increased credibility. Trust, as you know, is not built through slogans, unless you're McDonald's, but it's built through consistency, transparency, and follow-through. So let's talk a little bit about the work streams. Complaint and pattern tracking. Tracking trends across complaints and concerns. And a first peek at this revision is our monthly report. So you will note, beginning on page 6, when you look in your monthly report, we now have that demographic breakdown and analysis. So not only is it on the website as just that analysis, but it's in the monthly report. And so as I shared earlier, this will be completed going back to July 1st, 2025, which will assist in the development of month-to-month, quarterly, and annual reports. Policy and research work stream. Producing analysis and recommendations around policy, technology, and systemic practices. Transparency and reporting. Making information accessible and understandable to the public. And then community and legislative strategy, building relationships and helping shape broader accountability conversations. So what we will produce. So this is where the accountability actually becomes visible. We don't just talk about it, we show it, and people can see what it looks like. So dashboards, and I've mentioned this, interactive public-facing data. We will be creating, again, more dynamic and more interactive. And you saw this example from Lou. Insight briefs. These are concise summaries of findings or trends. So just a page or two of just reporting something that people could just take a minute or two to look at. Proposals for change, which was the example from tonight. So these are formal recommendations around policy and practice. And Kevin, if you would hand this out now. Public explainers, we've started doing these. These are 1 to 2 that we will do a month. These are accessible documents that help the public understand complex issues. And so, as Kevin is handing them out, Kathy, you have it in your hand, I see. Will you turn your mic on and read? What is our first public explainer? I think it's really important that this is our first one. Read the title for me. For us. Yes, the title.
Public Explainer, Understanding the Rochester Police Accountability Board Litigation.
Yes. Right? So people have been hearing about the Locust Club 1 or Locust Club 2 or 2019 and the vote. This public explainer just simply walks individuals through, just since 2019, police accountability has been through a lot in Rochester, but from 2019 through 2026, it just explains it. You'll see there's a glossary, so people, if there are things that they don't understand, we try to make that accessible. So you will see 1 to 2 of these come out every month. And those of us who are on the leadership team will begin to write those. So Kevin, it obviously made sense, given where we are right now, to start with this one around our litigation. But we are looking at different areas and different topics, and certainly as board members, if there are things that you think would be important for our community to know about in a public explainer, we'd be happy to take that on and get that in the rotation. There are certain things that might be appropriate to do in a certain month, right, because it correlates with something. So please let us know. Identifying recurring patterns and concerns over time. So this is the work that creates accountability through information, visibility, analysis, and public transparency. Now let me mention the community engagement shift. So we also recognize something important. Listening alone is not enough. And as I shared, the PACE team, which is public affairs and community engagement, has done a phenomenal job over this past year. And I mentioned the interacting with over 4,500 community residents. So our current model talks about listening, right? But too often community members did not know, okay, well, what happened next? We had a conversation or we received some information, or what has changed, or whether their voices even had impact. So we're shifting to listening, analysis, action, and then reporting back. So this is working very closely with not only the legal department, but the policy and oversight team. Because that reporting back step is really what matters. Reporting back helps to build the trust that we actually listened. So over the next 90 days, which would start, the clock has already started rolling, but we're looking at July, August, and September. Our focus is operational discipline and public deliverables. And again, we wanted to show you very definitively tonight that we meant business about this and not say, well, in the next couple of weeks or in July. We wanted you to see documents, right, or evidence of that. So in our next 90 days, it's about understanding priorities. We'll continue to relationship build. We'll be establishing measures, actionable recommendations, and public-facing initiatives. So this isn't theoretical, pie-in-the-sky type of work. This is implementation work where we put our nose to the grindstone. And I hope that that has been outlined. So where do we go from here? Clear deliverables and timelines. Our community wants clarity. They want to know the direction that we're heading in. So tonight was the attempt or that first step to publicly articulate that. We obviously want to have continued communication openly with stakeholders and the community. And this third one is really, really important. Continue the appeal process and the legislative outreach. That doesn't sit on the back burner. We talk about this every week, about where we are, how we are engaging, how we are moving forward, because this continues. This transition does not mean that that broader accountability conversation is over. Like, we just don't say, We don't say that investigations is a word that we don't use anymore. We will constantly uplift that, and it's my expectation that you as a board will do that as well. So as I close, and I really thank you for your time and attention, the Police Accountability Board was created because this community believed that accountability matters. And I want to assure you that that belief has not changed. What has changed is the legal environment that we are operating in right now that has made it very challenging. So I say that strong organizations and agencies, they don't ignore reality. They adapt to it, they pivot, and they make the adjustments that are necessary. And while this chapter may look different than what many envisioned years ago or the way that we started, our commitment to accountability, to transparency, to systemic reform and public trust remains unchanged. This is not the end of oversight. This is the next evolution of it. I thank you, and I open up the floor for questions. Make sure you're real close to your mic so they can hear you, AJ.
All right. Thank you for that overview. I think it was helpful in sort of thinking about, how the agency is going to be able to move forward in light of the current legal restrictions on the agency.
Yes.
I liked a lot of what I saw in there. I did want to mention one thing related to sort of pattern and trend and practices analyses. And that's, I just want to clarify, at least in my opinion, it can be broader than just the complaints received.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I just want to be clear
thank
about
you.
that. We can certainly look for trends and patterns in the complaints received, but can also be broader than that, right?
Thank you for making that clarification because that wasn't explicit, and that's why questions are helpful because I have all of this in my head, and I know that.
Yep.
But thank you for making that plain. Yes.
Yeah, and again, just to be clear, for the sake of the public.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
So the agency is empowered under the charter. It's section 18-3, subsection J.
Yes.
And another section, 18-5, subsection C. Those sections indicate that the board shall review and assess patterns, practices, policies, and procedures.
Yes.
And just to give an example of all this, the patterns and practices also might be connected to policies that we might need to be recognized. Just to give sort of very hypothetical example.
Thank you.
This is not like a real example that I know of. It's just sort of hypothetical. Let's say the agency had received some complaints that officers were driving unsafely, maybe caused a traffic accident, but it didn't seem to be an emergency situation, right?
Sure.
Something like that. That might suggest, well, let's look at the pattern. Let's look at all of the traffic accidents that have occurred. Let's get records related to that.
Yes.
Let's see, were those traffic accidents, did they occur during an emergency or not?
Mm-hmm.
And if they are occurring not during an emergency, might there be policies that might be worth recommending to try to reduce the instances of traffic accidents, to reduce cost to the city and harm to the community? That's an example how starting with a trend just from a couple of complaints, but broadening it out to looking at all the traffic accidents that RPD gets into, evaluating what might be done to reduce those or reduce the risks of those might end up leading to policy recommendations.
Absolutely.
That's the way I think about these patterns, practices, policies, review assessments. I think that's work the agency can still do despite the leak.
Yes, thank you for that. And I think I tried to attempt to say that with the RTS, right? That we're seeing that there are complaints coming from there, and that we're looking at that. But I appreciate you doing that, adding that clarity, because that's really important for the public to know. Sometimes you get so entrenched in the work that you have it here, and so that was helpful. Thank you. Other questions? Feedback?
I don't have a question, but I just want to commend you and your team and the board members that have worked diligently to look at next steps and to keep the work going. There's a lot of opportunities. I see it as broadening and strengthening the PAB, being able to be where we're at now to look at the direction that we're going in. So for me, I'm excited about to see the work that's being done and looking forward to new direction. Going forward. Commend you for that.
Thank you. We are excited.
Particularly the fact that we will continue to fight to get our investigation.
Yes.
back.
That's really, really important. We don't ever want to forget that. And Kevin is up after me, and as general counsel, he'll talk through. We'll make sure that is a through line so that is not forgotten, and we uplift that. Absolutely. Reverend Patterson.
This is just an observation. And again, the work that is being done is of a high quality. However, I do have concerns for those people who reading is difficult for.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yes.
and so I think that maybe in the consideration of, say, when you do a public explainer,
Mm-hmm.
because I can read this.
Yes.
I read for a living.
Yes.
So that's not a problem for other people who may have had comprehension issues
Absolutely.
in their and gaps in their education, and they're the most affected by bad policing, or I shouldn't say bad policing, but policing that doesn't take into account the humanity of the person that's in a situation. So I'm just wondering, do you have any thoughts on that going forward?
I do, and I'm going to turn this way, and she knows I'm looking at her. Brianna, we are working on trying to do some more things through video. So because we know, whether we like it or not, what are we in? The TikTok revolution, if you will. And people like those sound bites that are about 2 to 5 minutes because that's about the capacity. After that, you start to get bored. So we're looking at, for example, how this was my executive director report, but how we can take my executive director report and turn it into a video, right? So explaining other things through video means some of our documents, obviously, we're going to write at that high level in that analysis, but other things like issue briefs, we can do things through video. And this is not to insult, but when you are interacting with the public, the rule of thumb is to write to a 5th grade level, right? And to make sure that it's easily understandable. So we are actively working on that, Reverend Patterson, and thank you for that question because it is important because not everyone can read. And the presentation from Dr. Feynman also reiterated not everyone speaks English, right? Some people speak a different language or are even deaf or hard of hearing. So we are trying to make sure that we diversify our portfolio, if you will, to make sure that we are hitting the different individuals in our community where this might not be the way that they can access it.
I'm happy to hear that, and thank you, Reverend Patterson, because something like that was also on my mind. And
Okay.
I do want to lift up some of the Instagram videos at least, and I
Don't
know
they rock? Brianna's doing her thing.
Yeah, and I also like to plug that we do see a summary of these board meetings in bite-sized videos to help disseminate that information. And I do want to point out, you mentioned earlier from the NACOL conference, and I was also there, that they did talk about authentic community engagement.
Yes.
And thank you for highlighting that too. And so, what Reverend Patterson was pointing to and what I'm pointing to is about equity. So I love this public explainer. I'm also seeing that it's, how many pages?
6 pages.
The one we have is 13 pages. This one? So all that to say, it's a lot of information to cover, and it should.
No, the monthly report is long.
The public
explainer? I thought it was just, okay.
Well, regardless. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
I'm sorry. We converted this. The Word document is 6 pages. We converted this to Canva. And so there's a lot more space in
Got
between.
it.
That's why I was like, no, it's only 6 pages, but that's a Canva document.
And
got
of course,
you.
there's some content that you just need the space.
Yes.
So I'm also curious: is there a capacity to shorten this even further? To have an idea of when you have a table, having the amount of information
Yes.
that people want to consume and can consume. So both twofold.
Yes.
That's good to know. And also, where will this be? It's one thing to create content, but have people come to you to get it. And I'm sure this is on your mind. I'm sure this is on Pace's mind. I'd love to hear some ways where we are disseminating this and
Sure.
going to the people.
So one of the things that we are toying with, Luam, is the use of QR codes up in different places, right? That people can hover their phones over and information will jump on their phone. Because if you've been reading the website utilization reports, that's how people are accessing, a lot of people are accessing our content is through their cell phone. So QR codes is a really fun way, an easy way to do that. When we go out through some of our PACE events, we're going to start using our iPads a little bit more because we know that technology is the ways that people are accessing information, and this is really a thing of the past.
I'd like to commend you and all of the staff for all the work that they do. One of the things that I want that you mentioned that I'm very interested in is setting up shop over at RTS.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the people are.
Yes.
And would like to, I'm asking, what are one of the 2, 3 things that seem to call you over there? Why did you all decide that that was a place that you needed to be?
Mm-hmm.
Did you see police action that was not positive? Were people mentioning that it wasn't positive?
Mm-hmm.
And once you see how the public responds to seeing the PAB from behind the desk and out where the public is, do you have any thoughts about other side places that we can set up camp to be where the community is?
So I stopped on question G of your, no, I'm just joking. So how did we come upon knowing that RTS was a hot spot? 2 things. Certainly by reading complaints that were coming through, but we also had individuals that spoke to our staff about the concerns, right? I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole right now, but we have some information that we're culling through and that we're looking through. So again, I think it will be powerful. We don't have a long trip to get there. That will be powerful to be at the RTS. Other areas that I'm thinking about would be the R centers, particularly in the summer. Those are hot spots where our young people are hanging out. I think it would be interesting to spend some time at the public market. That's a very diverse area where we have lots of people coming through, and we could do some community engagement at the public market. And then I don't want to forget about the fact that our places of worship are important places to go. We need to get into those areas and to spend time in those places. That's just a cursory review of some of the things that I'm thinking about. But again, board members, any one of you, if you have suggestions, we're open to going. Our PACE department is amazing, and they really work to go where the people are.
I'd just like to add the emergency rooms.
Thank you. That's what I was going to say.
Very active.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's wonderful that you all have opened a new door, and we're not trying to make this Pandora's box, but it's important to be where the people are. Early on, when the PAB started, every Saturday they were at the public market.
Okay. Didn't know that.
Every Saturday, yes. For those public market enthusiasts who like to get up early in the morning,
Yes.
who understand that carrots are much fresher and better when they're bought at the market than they
Yes.
are in the store. But it's an awesome way to meet, greet, and have conversations with people who are in need.
You know what I appreciate that, because when I had more time, I was at the public market every single Saturday. I love the community because you see everyone there. You see different socioeconomic status. You see different races and ethnicities, creeds, religions, ages, gender. I mean, there's no one prototype of the person who goes to the public market. And so to me, that makes sense as a place to go, because you're going to intersect with all the different stakeholder groups and different individuals in our community. and it's a fun place to hang out. It's a good place to be.
And with reaching out to the community as far as houses of worship, we want to make sure that we include all of the various worship area, faiths,
Absolutely.
different faiths. And because I don't want us to be accused of just hovering around one, that our arms and ears are open to persons of all faith,
Yes.
because they're all part of our community.
Absolutely. We just talked about that the other day, actually. Okay. With that, I thank you for your time. And the next individual who's coming is Kevin Rambold.
Thank you, Dr. Small.
Thank you. I would agree. So you can use the mouse.
Hello, folks. Kevin Rambold, General Counsel for the Police Accountability Board. How are you tonight? I want to thank you, guys. I want to point out that you guys work hard as well as us, and you're a completely volunteer board, and that needs to be acknowledged. So thank you for the work that you do for the community. Just briefly, I wanted to talk about several things that we're doing, the two attorneys are doing with regard to the projects that we have going. The first thing, of course, is the appeal process for our most recent case. The motion for leave to appeal to the Court of Appeals was filed by our outside counsel on April 20th of 26. Memorandum in opposition to that motion was filed by the Police Union Council on the 24th of April, 26, and the motion remains undecided. The return date for the motion that it would be heard by the court was May 4th. That date has passed. Motions in the appellate division are filed and submitted. There typically is no appearance by attorneys to make an argument about the motion that they file. We're waiting for the court to decide. The appellate division 4th Department has dates that it releases its decisions. I believe that includes motions as well as complete appeals. The dates we're looking at is June 5th, June 26th, and July 24th. Those are the next 3 dates that we can anticipate a decision on that motion. Again, we do have a second chance in the event that motion is not granted by the appellate division, where we can move the Court of Appeals, which is the highest court in the state, for permission to appeal to them. We feel we have relatively strong grounds to get into the Court of Appeals, and we're hoping for that, of course. That would be for us to get our investigative powers back, and we know how important that is to the board, the staff, and to this community, the entire city. We have not given up on that. And at the same time, I would also like to thank City Council for approving that appeal. That's an expenditure that they have made, and we want to note that that we do appreciate that. Our legislative proposal status. The Restore Rochester Mandate Act of 2026, as we've named it, the memorandum and proposed draft bill were completed on April 21st, and they were transmitted to the legislative delegation. They've all received a copy of that with our plea to please read it and to note the importance of it. We're still waiting to hear back from them. My suggestion with this is that the board consider maybe setting up a committee so that staff, legal counsel will have the ability to be able to communicate with the board, with the committee, so that we can formulate a plan, not only to coordinate together, but to create and continue momentum for this. It's very important that we push this on. We do note that the courts throughout this litigation have noted that the fix is with the legislature. So we're hoping that we can push on that front as well. That's our appeal, and that's also our proposal for the representatives in Albany. Whatever needs to be done, I'm willing to do it, and if there's a committee, I think it would help with that. Thank you for that. We're also doing an accounting of all of our complaints from the 28th of April of 2025 to the present date. We want to make sure that complaints are timely transmitted over to the RPD, which we always do, but we just want to ensure that. And we also want to create a foundation for an oversight project that we're considering with regard to finding out what exactly happens to the complaints that we transmit over to the RPD. We want to know what happens to them. Are they investigated? Are they administratively closed? What happens to those complaints? That's important for us all to know. And with that as well, that would provide feedback, given that we cannot do our investigations of individualized complaints, where we would have an investigation completed that we could provide to a complainant. Given that we can't investigate, we have no ability to be able to provide our complainants with an answer, what happened to my complaint. So we're doing this accounting so we know every single complaint, all of the allegations. We have it on a spreadsheet already, and we're formulating a plan to be able to learn from RPD what happened to these complaints. We deserve to know, the community deserves to know, the board deserves to know, and to be quite frank, I think it's important for the RPD to know as well. That's just a brief update of some things that we've been doing. I try to keep things somewhat vague, with regard to any strategies and things like that. But that's where we stand now as far as our legal department. If there's any questions,
sure,
I'm happy to answer them if I can.
I got a couple of questions.
Sure.
Number one, you suggest we set up a committee because getting back our investigation powers is important to all of us. So is there a reason why you would want a committee and not the entire board involved in this process?
To be clear, I do want the entire board to be involved in the process. I just need, we need maybe a point person so that we can communicate with the board, and then that person or those people can communicate with the remainder of the board so that we can get a good momentum going. That's my goal, not to cut anybody out at all.
I'll have a conversation with Larry if you guys don't mind, and since he's been our point person so far, unless someone else wants to volunteer. Great.
So based on Kevin's recommendation, I was thinking of moving during the new business section of the meeting to form that committee, and then maybe thereafter we can try to determine who's going to the members of that committee.
Sounds outstanding.
Good.
Can I just add something?
Great action.
So the whole board can be involved, but you have to remember when you start to get into some decision making, you can't have the full board, right? You can only have a subsection, so you want a smaller group. Obviously, the entire board would be kept in the loop, but if you're, doing those types of things, you need to have a sub,
Right.
a smaller group.
And my second question related to the fact that
Bill,
you indicated when you
one
send.
question?
I'm sorry.
I just want to ask you one question. Just about the subcommittee.
Okay.
So with the subcommittee, right? The subcommittee is going to bring it back to the board, and then is the board still going to vote on it as a whole, whether or not we're going to go along with it? That's the process, according to the charter, correct?
I think if it's something that needs to be voted on, certainly it would come back to the entire board. But the work, the subcommittee would work on, and then if there's something that needs to be voted on, obviously it would come back to the board.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
And just to clarify, I'm assuming that the concern about the board and the voting is we would need to comply with the open meetings law.
That was going to be my next
Meeting,
note.
discussing public business and voting on it. So we need to be mindful if we are going to be doing that. We need to be compliant with the open meeting.
Absolutely.
Correct. That was my next note, was that we have to be careful that we comply with the executive law. Yeah.
And my second question related to the fact that
If you step on that cord, that's what you get.
okay, you found out the hard way.
I know.
It's not hot.
Right. Was the fact that you indicated that when you send complaints over to the police department, you never know what the disposition is. I thought they were required to respond to us in a certain number of days. Do we have to send it to the chief in order to get the response back, or is there a way? Because I agree 100%. We need to know what happens when we send complaints regarding abuse of power.
We don't get that information. We don't. No.
There was a section of the charter originally that was that indicated that the chief was supposed to indicate to the board what had happened related to a complaint.
Right.
I'd have to double check. That may have been one of the sections related to investigation and discipline
Correct.
that was struck down by the courts.
Okay. Thanks.
Correct. Because that has to do with individual police officers.
All right.
That would be part of the investigation. So yes, we created we with the assistance of the board, when we would have panels for the complaints, we would have a result to be able to report back to our complainants.
Right.
That's missing at this particular point.
One other thing, you said something about it has to go through legislation, correct?
We have a proposal that we've drafted for purposes of the delegation that goes to Albany Senator and his Assembly people for purposes of a carve out for Rochester, for purposes of being able to have a outside police accountability board doing investigations.
Okay, I guess what I'm asking that question is, will we be writing new legislation for the charter? Is that our goal?
This proposal is not that, no.
Okay.
That proposal would be something that would be within the city itself to amend the charter, if that's what your question is.
Right, and in order to get the complaints, what was done to them from the chief, would that also require new legislation to be written?
I think that we can get sufficient information from RPD with regard to our complaints as to what happened to them, that we would be able to report back without there needing to be an amendment.
Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
Correct. That's my opinion.
Just one last thing. Thank you for all the work that you, Hojin, and AJ did on the Restore Rochester Mandate Act. It was very well written. Is there a timeline on that of when we can expect to hear back from our state legislation?
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think the wheels in Albany probably turn slowly. So
an estimation.
So I don't know. As part of the committee that I had not proposed that I feel would be helpful, we could set up these mechanisms to communicate with our members, where they know that it's going to be a particular person from the board, a particular person from the PAB, so that, again, we need to create the momentum, and we got to keep the momentum going. And that's what my goal is with this. I think it's a very important aspect for the board and for the PAB. Anything more? Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. We have Dolores Ivy Page, Director of Operations.
Good evening, everyone.
Yes. These mandatory trainings, are you going to send them out in advance? Like, we'll have a calendar so that we don't have to, get an email and then it's due on a certain date. So could you provide a calendar if you already got them, know what we need to get training in, and give us that calendar and the due date for it? I said mandated ones. I guess, okay, so is there someone in the city that we can get a calendar for the mandated training? But we're not employees. Okay. I understand that, but we don't be on our laptops every day. And my laptop has been for a year. Matter of fact, from the first time I got here, it wasn't working correctly. So a lot of us, if you ask any of the board members up here, we have problems with the emails. We have problems getting them. So therefore, that's why I'm asking the question. Okay, because we need to know in advance because our emails don't work. Half the time the computers don't work. Okay, well, all the board members up here, we're going to raise our hand because we all got issues with the laptops. Okay.
I just have just one comment. Just this week, there was an issue where there were some software updates, but it didn't tell me that I needed to have those updates done. I thought that they were automatically done. I didn't know if it also applied to my situation. So I actually, my email was not connecting to the server. So I had to go through a whole bunch of things because I said this will be the day that I don't look at it. And there is important information. And secondly, there is this thing that if something goes wrong, you have to get up and take your laptop to a City of Rochester building to connect on. So, like, I was grateful that somehow there was a glitch and I didn't have to do that, but it's very, I think, inconvenient for some of us. No, I'll talk for me. I'll use I statements. Okay. It is inconvenient for me to have to get in my car, go downtown, try to find a place to park, and then to sign on or then have a conversation in a city government building with IT. That just seems to be a little cumbersome for me.
What I can do is I can ask IT if you can bring the laptop to 57 St. Paul, and then possibly they can pick them up there if that's something you want to do, as opposed to going to the PSB.
No,
that could be an option.
No, I was going to come to St. Paul, but I didn't know how to access it because I don't have ID like I did beforehand. Because no one, whoever is at the door doesn't know me from Adam.
So when you come in, you would need to call someone. So you can call me.
Okay.
Let me know that you're coming. I'll meet you up there because you're not a city employee. You would need to be escorted down. Or I can just pick the laptop up from there. You're welcome.
I have a comment or question based on that, and this might not be a question for you to answer, Dolores, but you mentioned that once we enter the building, we'd have to call someone from the PAB office, and I know that I've had that conversation previously. That is a bit alarming to me in terms of people that wouldn't know a phone number from someone at the PAB office. And I feel like we've had conversations about the people at the front door, the security that's there, should know exactly where to direct people, whether it's externally and walk around the building or walk through the building. But I would hope to think that someone at the front of the building would know how to direct people to the PAB office. Is that?
They do.
Okay.
So if you come to the front of the building and you say you're looking for a particular person, they would have a contact list, and they would contact someone in the office to let you know that you have to be escorted down. So that's all city buildings, actually. So if you're not an employee without a city ID, then someone from the city who works at the city would need to escort you inside the building. So that's common practice throughout.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I just want to say.
Sorry. I just wanted to add, I know that there's a frustration relative to the email, the city email. And so Dolores is the point person, and she'll work on that. And I know sometimes board members want it sent to their personal emails. We have to be very careful about that, because if there's a FOIL request, that can open up looking at your emails, and I don't think you want that. So we will work to make sure we address laptop issues and get the email straight. The other thing I try to do, but I can't do it always, but if there's something that's really, really important, you'll see a text message from me. Please check your email because it's important. So I do work to do that as well when I can.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I just want to say I really appreciate the work you're doing. It's not quite as glamorous or as some of these other things, but very important to the mission of the agency in terms of making sure we keep up with our trainings and have a building to work in. So I just want to say I appreciate you.
Thank you.
That said, to Leslie's point, I was going to make a similar point just about if there's something that's particularly time sensitive, the fastest way I think to reach most of us is with a phone call or something along those lines, just to let us know, hey, there's an email or there's something that needs to be addressed quickly. So just for the record, I want to say that might be the fastest way to get a hold of any of us is if there's some looming deadline or something that we need to respond to. And hopefully we can get the email situation squared away relatively quickly so that doesn't become a further impediment. But I just want to say appreciate that. If you ever need us very immediately, phone call is probably the best way to do it.
Thank you. So as I understand it, is Yvonne and Reverend Patterson that are having issues? Anyone else? Did I answer? Okay.
Yes.
Unfortunately, that's not something I can change. The city has gone through a new ID requirement, and it just doesn't impact the PAB board. It impacts other individuals who actually do work with the city who are not city paid employees. So it's more of a security issue. So that's not something that I can change or anyone at the PAB can change. These are our directives that we were given. I understand that, but there are other individuals who have business. I did talk to them about that, and unfortunately that's a firm. I can go back again, but that's the directive that was given to me.
Well, the only thing I'm thinking is that maybe we should give Miguel a call. Or I can give the mayor a call to see if it can be changed, because I mean I've walked the entire loop several times because they didn't know who I was or why I was there, or basically where you were.
Or another option could be, I don't know if there's parking, because there is limited parking there because there is rock music that was there before.
Right.
So there are students there and there are parents drop off there. But if you do come in a non-busy time, you can always park on the Bragdon side by the blue door, and you can be buzzed in that way.
Right. Yeah. Now that we know where the blue door is, we know the park back there, and it's in the back.
Do we know where the determination came from regarding the ID badges?
Yeah.
I do not. I just know I sent an email in regards to that, and it impacts everyone throughout the city who is not a paid city employee. Actually, we all, as city employees, had to turn in our previous badges to get new ones because they're on a new Genetech system. So they wanted to make sure that they had everyone's badge accurately if it was lost, and it's kept in a file there. So I imagine it's a security reason. I'm not really sure, but that's what was told to me, that if you are not a paid city employee, you will not have a badge. And particularly in a city building, you need to be escorted in by someone who actually works in the facility.
And who manages that office, or who are you in contact with there?
So I'm in contact with IT. I'm in contact with city security, the superintendent of security, and I've been given the same directives.
But if we go to the president of city council and indicate that this is an issue, I mean, wouldn't that be better to have it come down? Yes.
We've been given that directive, but if there is something, another chain of command that you can go through, certainly we'd be open to it. But I just want to make sure it's clear. If you received a badge, you still wouldn't be able to buzz in. They'd have to buzz you in. It doesn't give you access. You can't.
Excuse me, so we don't prolong this for something we can resolve. Mr. President, I would like to suggest that you take 1 or 2 board members, form a small committee to find out the best way to do what needs to be done so that the board members are pleased or satisfied or get information as to how we can do this better.
Well, what I'll do is I'll go to the top and find out why we can't get in and ask for a full explanation, and that'll be the end of it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you for outstanding report, as usual.
You're welcome. Have a good evening.
While I'm up here, I am going to before I introduce Dr. Ashley Campbell, who's our interim director of policy and oversight, I'm going to give the PACE report. Brittany is out on medical leave, and so I'm going to give that report. PACE has been really, really busy gearing up for the summer season. You know that this is their busy season. So on the 30th, they have the Ease On Down tabling, where we'll be on Thurston, and that is from 12 to 5. And then again on June 20th, so the day after Juneteenth, on Saturday, we will be actively engaged in Juneteenth down at the MLK Park, and that is an all-day affair. And then, as I shared just briefly, tomorrow I'll be going to a nonprofit agency with Jason Monroe, one of our community engagement specialists, and we are going to work on developing the curriculum and the professional development for the talk. And we are very, very excited about that. So that's PACE in a nutshell. I'll put some more things a little more explicitly in the Friday letter that'll give you a little more detail, but that is the PACE update. And with that, I will.
Actually, just a quick.
Oh,
question.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
No. Before you go, I need to acknowledge what a great job you did with your first district meeting. Lawam handled some really good questions. She gave a comprehensive presentation that was very well received. We had about a little over 20 there at the MLK Lodge. And one thing that I talked to the PACE team about that we are going to change, nothing with the presentation, we need to, especially if we're going to get back to the community, we're going to take down each question. So AJ, you're up next. So we will make sure that and it was hard to hear a little bit because I couldn't hear every question that night. I briefly heard, but I captured what I could. And so we'll work on responding to the questions that I could hear last Monday. But when AJ is up on the 28th of May at David Gant Center, right? Oh, no. Maplewood Y. I'm sorry, because we have a few of these. We will make sure that we capture down the questions and figure out the mechanism to make sure we get a response back to the question. So that is a minor modification that we want to make sure that we are giving that feedback in as real time as possible. Okay? And with
well, my question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
It's good. Just a simple one. The talk. I'm really looking forward to this
Yes.
event. We've been hearing about it for a while. Is there a proposed date for that?
We won't know until we meet with the agency. We're meeting with them
ABC?
tomorrow, and then we're going to map out what that looks like.
Okay.
So my hope is that we can move forward in late summer. And remember, summer goes until September 23rd.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Thank you.
Okay.
And just one suggestion for the presenters. When someone from the audience asks a question,
Respond.
it's very helpful if the presenter repeats the question
Thank you.
over the mic so that all of the persons in the room can hear what the question is.
Agreed.
That will facilitate a lot of
Yes.
what you're talking about. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. How are you? Good? All right. Well, my name is Dr. Ashley Campbell. I serve as the interim Director of Policy and Oversight. I am ecstatic to be a part of the Police Accountability Board. Just wanted to share with you a little bit of my background. I come to this work with a transdisciplinary lens, which in essence means that I have a swath of different disciplines that I lean into in order to actually do the work and engage in the work. And so some of those disciplines that I have expertise in rest in psychology, neuroscience, media studies, ethnic psychology, and a few others. Professionally, I come with expertise around program development and evaluation, data analysis, as well as some systems optimization work and equity. I know that is sometimes considered a naughty word, but the diversity, equity, and inclusion work is definitely still very much a part of my existence and the work that I do. And of course, I'm ever so excited to really engage in the policy briefs and the all of the different documentation truly that we will be engaging in. The data analysis work is very much an excitable element for me. But what I'm really looking forward to, and I know the conversation was mentioned earlier around the observational walks and engagement, some of my background rests in analysis work or methodologies resting in arts-based research. I know it may sound foo-foo, but it actually is not. And it really engages in a few different modalities of how do you really look at a situation from so many different lenses and then be able to document that information in a way that can truly be transmitted into reports or video presentations or what have you. And so that kind of work we will truly be digging our teeth into. And so we're truly excited to get into that. So thank you so much. All right.
Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Okay.
I wanted to say that, as you're coming to the agency, I'm sure, as you know, at a challenging time when the focus of our work is on this policy work.
Yes.
So I just wanted to, offer my my perspectives on this thing. Maybe not right here, but there might be a time where it might make sense to me, and I'd be happy to share some of my perspectives and experience on sort of how this project came to be,
Absolutely.
This agency came to be,
Mm-hmm.
and sort of as we think about what the next steps look like in terms of policy and oversight.
Mm-hmm.
From my perspective, there is an incredible amount of work to do, and so I think one of the challenges is going to be trying to figure out where to devote limited time and energy. So I'd be really curious to speak more with you about that, get your perspective on that.
Absolutely.
Sort of share notes about what's going on.
Perfect. I welcome that. Thank you.
Thank you and welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move into the chairperson's report. I'm going to combine my report with the training report. But I'm going to start by indicating I'm very, very pleased with the outcome of the meeting today. I really like the public explainer that we're putting out in the community because, many people didn't realize that on April 28th of 2025, we lost our ability to conduct investigations of police misconduct. And while we appealed that process, then again on March 20th, the appellate court upheld the fact that we could not do investigations. Well, many of us worked with our investigative team, and I have to say that was an outstanding group of individuals that were very objective in their review and very objective in their presentation of data. So we did lose a great team when we lost our investigative team. And I look forward to the fact that we're fighting hard to get that back, that we're doing 2 tracks. We're looking at the appeals process, and as it was indicated earlier, council did approve funding so that we can have attorneys to fight the appeal, so hopefully we can get it back. But I'm really excited about the legislative option because I personally think that will be the quickest way for us to regain our powers once the laws are clarified, and once the judges understand that discipline and investigation are 2 different things, and they don't really mean the same thing as the appeals process more or less said. But I just wanted to give a shout out to our investigators because they really did do a great job, and we're hoping that at some point in time when we regain our powers, we will be able to rebuild that team and continue the work that we do, because that was one of the things that brought me to the board, the fact that we had the power to investigate and to report to the community, because we know in the past the different processes that the city had. If you didn't report your findings to the community, it was like you didn't do your job. And I think we had the highest input in our IT system, our website, once we started publishing the results of our investigations. So I do look forward to that coming back. Also, Dolores Page, I want to thank you with your work that you're doing on the dashboards as it relates to training, because when I last checked, just about every board member had completed the IT training that was required. I know I have one member I need to call, and I will make sure I make that phone call. But and Yvonne, I just wanted to express also that some of the training, while we may not be able to get it a year in advance, because I don't even think the city knows what type of threats that will come up through IT. But I will stress the fact that we get it as soon as we possibly can. So the other thing I wanted to point out is that when you look at our charter, Section 18.6 indicates that the board shall select a chairperson and vice chairperson by a majority vote at the first meeting after July 1st of each year. So our July meeting, we will be meeting and we will be selecting a new board chair for the Police Accountability Board. So if anyone's interested, please let us know so we can put your name in the hat and have the vote. And so that we can do that vote. And the other thing I wanted to point out before I ended my report was I too attended the NACOL training in Minneapolis, and that is the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement. And one of the sessions I went to, which was, I thought was very, very a great session, it indicated that in cities where we have police accountability boards, incidents of police misconduct actually decrease. They don't increase not because there's a safeguard there. And the researcher also indicated that the more authority that the board has, the fewer the incidents that occur. And I think the research was done over like a 5-year period. So having police accountability is important, and having a strong police accountability board is more important. And that's why we really need to fight hard to make sure that we get our investigators back and that we're able to report to the public not only on a trend basis but on an individual basis as it relates to police misconduct. With that, I'm going to end my remarks and see if there are any questions.
Not a question, but I do want to lift up that last point you said, and I also want to say that at the last public comment session that Sarah Jenks had, she said something that really resonated with me, which was oversight is infrastructure. And I feel like that really ties in with your with your last words, and that is just something that's so important. This agency started in 2021, and infrastructure takes a long time to build, and we are still in that building stage. And of course, it is hard to build when we have powers that be that are fighting against us every step of the way. I also want to lift up what you said about our investigators that are no longer at the agency, and thank them for the work that they've done, but also call out that once we do get our investigation powers back, and we hire new investigators, we did not just lose staff members, we lost a wealth of knowledge. A lot of those investigators were at the agency from its since the beginning, and it's really unfortunate that they are no longer at the agency, because of course once we receive our investigatory powers back, there is going to be a huge backlog, and those investigators have been working in those cases with those people since those complaints have been received, and we lost a huge part of our agency that we will not get back. So this is a setback, but of course our agency is kind of used to setbacks, unfortunately, but we will keep on building. So thank you.
Also, I did want to add one final comment to Dr. Feynman. I really enjoyed your presentation. I have a granddaughter, unrelated, I have a granddaughter who's deaf, and I take her out to dinner maybe once a month, and it's the most quietest dinner that we ever have. But I use this. We actually, because I don't know ASL, so I'm actually using my phone, and we text each other through the whole dinner. So, but thank you for your presentation.
And I just want to say to the community, the PAB board is part of social justice. So you voted for us, I think 75% in 2019. And we, the board and the PAB staff, we cannot fight this battle by ourselves. So as we engage in community townhouses or conversations, I want to say implore you to come out to the town halls, bring your questions. If you don't know what the PAB board is about, bring the questions and we will be happy to answer the questions. But we do need you to back us up, okay? And once again, this is social justice. And I really don't like the word systemic racism, but I believe this is part of that, because the city of Rochester is a diversity of different cultures, but most of them right now, it was black and brown people. It's changing, and but we need to come together as a whole. Different languages, different cultures, different backgrounds, different faith. But I believe if we come together, I say it says together we can fight the battle, but divided we stand. And I also want to say to the police department, once again, we are not your enemy. You are not our enemy. So you are also part of the community. So with all this stuff going on, you really should be, I want to say, glad that somebody's taking the time to try to get the community so we get on one accord, so we can move forward and be, who we're supposed to be in the community. So that's all I got to say. And I implore, like Dolores, I know that's your job. So when I'm vocal, it's not personally at you. It's at the systemic racism, or whatever you want to call it, is at the government. Okay, so they need to do better than what they're doing, because we are the Police Accountability Board, and we should be, I want to say, exempt. We're not the community. We're not just walking in off the street. But anyway, well, we're supposed to be one, so we're supposed to be able to come together on one accord and get the job done to protect our community.
Youth and community engagement.
Yes, thank you. There isn't too much of an update from the Youth and Community Engagement Committee at this stage. We are working to evaluate how we can be of service to the agency and to the PACE department. At this point, we did receive a great summary of a recommendation of our structure and how we can continue to serve as a training committee, and I have a meeting with Board Member Wilson for us to connect next week to really break that down and figure out exactly how we'd like to move forward. And in the meantime, we've also been busy with our district meetings. Sorry, I didn't mean to do that in the mic. And I just want to lift up, I had mine last week, and as Dr. Leslie Myers-Small mentioned, Board Member AJ is going to have his on May 28th. We have our South District on June 10th, and then shortly after that, we will have our Northeast District meeting that is still being scheduled. And I'd also like to thank the staff for all the work you did in creating the presenting materials, making sure that I was prepared to come to that meeting and setting up all the logistics. It was really easy to just walk in there and focus on what I wanted to say with all of the work that you all did. So thank you. I'm sorry, Board Member Wilson, did you have anything to add? Okay, thank you.
Okay, is there any old business? Any new business?
Yes, I would move for the creation of a committee regarding the legislation.
Agreed. I took note, and I'm assuming that the committee can be up to 3 members. Okay, and you've already indicated you would like to be on that. Is there anyone else who'd like to serve on it? Because I will be giving Larry a call also.
I think we can volunteer Larry because he's not here. He can't say no, so we can put him on the.
Sounds good. Okay. So you have that, right, Kevin? You got your committee. All right, thank you.
So do we have to vote on the creation of the committee? Like, do we need a second?
Yeah.
Now, I just want to ask a question. Can you nominate somebody? Because I want to nominate Arlene Brown. She has a lot of background in what we're doing. So we need a diversity in the committees. We don't need the same people continually being on all the committees. That's all I got to say. And I don't know what I'm doing.
Will she accept? Oh, absolutely. Then we got a 3-person committee.
Okay. All right. Just in terms of process, I think we need to create the committee first, and then we can fill it. So I just want to make sure we need a second for the motion to create the committee.
Second?
I second.
So all in favor? Aye. Okay, great. The committee is
now we have a committee
established, and the members have been determined. Okay, with that, we're going to move into executive session. Do we have no executive? Anyone wish?
Yeah, I think we should do executive session to discuss some personal matters and litigation matters.
Okay, we'll be moving into executive session for personal and litigation matters.
I second that.
Okay,
all
got
in
second?
favor?
All in favor? Aye. Okay, we don't expect any votes to be taken tonight, so we will be coming back to adjourn the meeting. Thank you for joining us, and have a great evening. Good evening. We're back from executive session. No votes were taken.
Second. Aye.
Good night. In Robert Rules of Order, you don't really need a vote to adjourn. You just no, you don't. You just adjourn the meeting. Well, no, we have to come. I think we have to come back, but you don't need a vote. Mm-hmm. Right.